Hello, my Watsons. What's up? It's a culture detective here investigating your favorite albums. And yes, from now on, my fan base will be called Watsons. And today I'm going to be doing another classic album review. Yes, I'm doing it. Yes! Ah! In fact, this is the sixth album in the classic album review series that I've been doing, and I'm doing 7 albums a time, and this is the sixth one, which means that one more will be coming right after this one. So today I'm going to be doing a review of J Dilla Donuts. Legendary instrumental hip hop artist J Dilla with his sophomore album Donuts. This is one of the most prominent and critically acclaimed, wide appraised albums in the world of instrumental hip hop. And there's also a tragic backstory to this album. I don't know why, but in my classic album review series, there are so many tragedies, unfortunately. The tragedy in this one is that Jay Dilla passed away 3 days after releasing this album from a cardiac arrest. And so this album not only gained legendary status because of its amazing music, but also because of Jay Dilla's tragic passing so close to this album's release. And the album is essentially instrumental hip hop, and in the mid 2000s, it's not like a crazy new genre already, because in the late 90s and early 2000s we already have musical acts like DJ Shadow and the Avalanches, and they produce some really amazing instrumental hip hop that breaks barriers. They're groundbreaking. And I may be so bold as to suggest that there are even some new Jabez influences in this album as well. One of the most, if not the most amazing hip hop producer coming from Japan, who has worked on multiple anime soundtracks. So all these influences sort of come together to form what we see and hear as Donuts. And what's awesome about this instrumental hip hop album is that there's kind of charisma to this album. There's raw grittiness to all of the beats on the album that make them feel kind of imperfect, yet at the same time they're paired on top of sweet samples that sometimes there's soul, sometimes it's R&B, sometimes it's jazz, sometimes it's pop, sometimes it's just strings, sometimes it's something eclectic. But the sampling on this album is very eclectic. And also another thing to note before I dive into the tracks is that this album has 31 tracks. The album overall is 43 minutes, but it has 31 tracks, with each track ranging between 1 or 2 minutes long. So obviously there's a lot, yet at the same time there isn't a lot. And all of these tracks are very simple. They're usually just an instrumental loop, they're usually just something simple, and it just lasts very short. And every time we go from one track to another track, it's like we're tasting something, like a taste test, and then we're testing something else, and then we're testing something else. It's a lot of flavors all across the spectrum throughout the album. So it's a very interesting listen. The album opener after the intro is working on it, and it's a humble beginning with funky bass, awesome guitars, some cool big group vocals, and it is a welcoming and energetic opening to the album. The next track, Waves, is much slower and meditative, but still holds up the pacing. Light It is honestly really interesting because this track is like if The Doors' Light My Fire is a soul chant. Come on baby, light my fire, but happy and not weird and psychedelic and poppy. And we have the drums that sort of drown out the sound on this track as well. And then we have the new, where the soundtrack sounds like it came out of a cool cartoon with disc scratches and looped big horns. Then we have the track Stop, which I think is one of the highlights on the album. This is a really sweet and beautiful and blissful track, and also the vocals are just awesome with the watery pianos in the back. You better stop and think about what you're doing. And then we have People, which is a low-key cut with tribal drums, chants, weird breathy sounds. It's kind of moody and atmospheric. And then to follow that up, we have The Difference, which is this very psychedelic chopped piano looping track. So once again, very eclectic. You can never predict what the next track will sound like. The track Mash, we hear some jazzy pianos instead, and on this track it also gets a little glitchy. And then Time, the Donut of the Heart is easily one of the best tracks on the album. We have this very catchy guitar lick, and it's just a fun, sweet time. And following that, we have a series of great tracks that feature a lot of sound play, a la Lightworks, The Twister, Thunder, and The Factory, which is in the last third of the album with its weird, demented reverse bleeps and bloops. If there's a way to describe it, that's how I would describe that track. And then we have moody, spacey cuts like Stepson of the Clapper and Geek Down, and also many other tracks that jump between soul and jazz and dreamy strings, which J Dilla will go on to use and reuse throughout the entire album. We have Two Can Win, and I freaking love this track. Only one can win. Ooh. And it's funny because it's Only One Can Win, but the track title is called Two Can Win. But yeah, I love the funky soul pop samples on the track with the chipmunk falsetto vocals. There's a muffled quality for this track, which makes me sound like I'm being locked in a chamber, and these angelic vocals sort of circle around me or something. And following that, we have Don't Cry, which is the most gorgeous track on the entire album. We have the guitars and strings that form a harmony that feels like a warm hug. And we also get these things which I think are xylophones. And similarly, we have You Love, which is another welcoming warm hug with scat singing and horns. The last 2/3 of the album, or the last 1/3, I mean 1/3, becomes very loopy. And by that I mean every single track feels so much more simpler, and because of that, I feel less. I enjoy less a little bit in the last third of the album. I enjoy a little bit less, but that still doesn't take away from the charisma of this album. And we have tracks like High and By, which feels like two tracks that feels like watching the TV at 4 a.m. in the morning, sleepy and drunk. And there's just something about the last third of the album that just feels like we're finally entering the last stage of the album, and everything sort of slows down and it feels a little sleepy. However, the album ending Last Donut of the Night is awesome. It feels like an accumulation of all the previous tracks on the album with disc scratches and dreamy strings, and it is a really solid ending to the album. The outro track, Welcome to the Show, is ironic because welcome to the show, but it has already ended, with weird muffled vocal harmonies, but it sort of smoothly loops back into the intro track of the album. So yeah, overall, while this isn't an album that I would constantly listen to or anything, it's still undeniable to say that there's a lot of charisma. I love the sampling on this album, and a lot of the tracks here are fantastic and are worthy of the legendary status that they have. So yeah, I'm giving J Dilla's Donuts a strong 8 to a light 9 out of 10. So, have you listened to J Dilla's Donuts? Comments below, let me know, subscribe if you want more, and thanks for watching. I gotta go and buy some groceries because I'm running out of food.